Hey everybody, it's Kennedy Hawk back with another few Mighty Marvel Minutes. This time we're going to talk all about Power of cards, or sometimes what I would call Power Off cards. Let's begin. Resources. Everyone loves to have resources in their hand and in their deck in Marvel Champions. Basic resources are basically auto-includes at this point. You almost put them in every hero unless your hero has an obnoxious amount of resources like Black Panther or Captain Marvel, and even then, I often still include all three basic resources. That's because regardless of what card type you draw, if you draw anything that costs 2 or more, that basic resource can pay itself off. Power ofs are a lot more questioned. A lot of people in the community say different things. I just went around searching for the comments people have had when people ask questions about Power of cards. I've seen some people say they always include them. I've seen some idiots like me say that they want to have 7 to 8 targets. I've had people say they want to have 10 or more targets, and some people that say they don't use them at all anymore. So what's a deck builder to do? As we always like to talk about, we're going to math it out. And it's some complicated math, so we're not going to show any math in here. We're just going to use a really easy calculator that's available to everybody that has an internet browser, so probably everybody watching this YouTube video. And you can do all sorts of calculations for yourself to figure out what you're comfortable with. So let's swap to a browser calculator and we can talk about exactly what's going on. I guess I didn't delete my words from the last presentation we did. All right, so we are at this website. It's mtgnexus.com/tools/draw-odds. And they have a card drawing odd calculator. So there's 2 different calculators you can use, and we'll talk about both of them. I'm going to zoom in on them so that they are really big on the stream here for everybody. So first, let's say we have a typical Marvel Champions deck of 40 cards. Let's consider the fact that we run probably 2 Power of cards, and we're going to start by drawing 6 cards. And we want to know the odds that we're going to draw one of those cards in our opening hand. This is disregarding mulligans and some complicated math like that. But you can see right here the odds of drawing 1 or more cards, Power Ofs, is about 28%. So you have a pretty good chance of drawing a Power of card in your opening hand. And this can be the same thing that happens turn after turn. Now, if you're in hero form, right, this is going to drop down to 5. And we can see the odds go down pretty significantly just by drawing 1 less card. So your best way to increase your odds of drawing a Power of is to have more card draw and ramp in your deck. Have an Avengers Mansion, have other things that let you trigger and draw cards, and you're going to have a better chance of drawing this. Now that's all cute and everything, but that's just telling you your odds of drawing a Power of card. What we might care about is, okay, well what if I'm running 8 copies that can trigger that Power of card? Well, I have a 69% chance of drawing 1 or more of those. But what are the odds when you have to combine these 2 calculations together? And that's where we're going to look at this bottom calculator. So we'll get back to this top calculator in a little bit, but let's go back to the bottom and assume we have 40 cards in our deck. We have 2 Power of cards, and card B here is going to be how many copies of a target we have. So copies that would let you use the double resource. So I'm going to say 7, because that's the number I always talk about on the podcast, and we're going to show you why I am very dumb. So here is your odds of getting at least 1 copy of card A, your Power of card, and 1 copy of card B in hand when drawing 5 cards. 13%. That's pretty abysmal, right? That's like 1 in 10 turns this is going to work out, slightly more than that. So let's go up to 8. I say sometimes 7 to 8. Okay, 14%. So it didn't get that much better. I mean, it did get better, don't get me wrong. More targets is good. But, I mean, let's say we want to get to 25%, so it's 1 in every 4 turns. We're going past 10. We're going past 15. We're going past 18. We're going past 20. Let's just go to 25, right? That's how many cards you add to your deck. You need more than 25 cards that can trigger a Power of before you get to a 25% chance to do this. It's really, really difficult to guarantee that this is going to happen. So you're never going to get to that point. But there are some tips and tricks we can do to look through this calculator and figure out what's going on, right? If you're only running 4 cards that can trigger a Power of and 2 Power ofs, you have less than 10% chance of drawing them. At that point, you probably shouldn't run Power ofs. There's no magic number here that I'm comfortable with or that I would tell you to be comfortable with, but there's some things to consider, right? We're going to talk about deck thinning again in the future, but if you think about thinning your deck, if you're playing a long game and you think by the end of the game you're going to thin your deck down to 30 cards, well, 30 cards versus 40 cards, that's like a 6% change in chance. So let's go back down to 30 cards and say, okay, what if we had our 8 targets? Oh, well, now we're cooking. Now we're almost at 25% chance at the end of the game when we're in our ramped final form that we talked about in the video a couple days ago. You're going to be at a pretty good odds Still not great odds, but a gooder odds, a better odds of making this work out. You can also consider, okay, well, what if I was in alter ego form and now I was drawing 20 or 6 cards instead of 5 cards? Or if I had an Avengers Mansion and I was in alter ego form, now I have a really good chance of getting those power ups to combine. So characters that are going to flip more and see more cards, it might make more sense to run the power ups in them. Characters that have lots of card draw, so I'm thinking of Avengers Mansion, Captain Marvel, even people that let you cycle cards like Hulk, they might have a better chance of seeing these power ups. Obviously, forehand size characters, like I just mentioned Hulk, they're going to have pretty abysmal odds at 40 of getting anything because they barely draw any cards. So there's a trade off to be done there, too. Let's go back to our standard hero thing with my recommendation of 7 to 8 cards with 2 copies of Power of. So again, let's say we're thinning our deck down to 30 cards and we have 8 Power of cards in our deck. We have to remember how many of those cards are events, because those are going to stay in your deck forever and ever and ever, versus permanents. And when I say permanents, I mean an upgrade you throw on the board, or a support you throw on the board, or a card that removes itself from your deck and like goes into the encounter deck, like might appear in Mad Titan's Shadow. I would consider allies like semi-permanent, because usually they don't stay on the board, but if your deck plan is to keep those allies on the board forever, you could consider those permanents as well. So if like 5 of your cards are permanents, all of a sudden by the end of the game, those power-ups, even though you've thinned your deck by getting rid of targets for power-ups, so it doesn't really help you very much. And this video might not help you very much, because I don't have a concrete, strong, perfect answer for everybody. It's really what you feel comfortable with and how often you want to see that combo occur. So my general rule of thumb, and I'm going to stick to my guns here and say I like to have 7 to 8 targets. I would tell you that if you had 6 targets only, it doesn't change your chance that much of having this combo go off. 7 to 8 just makes me feel well about it. I do like to say 7 to 8 non-permanent targets. So this means if I'm running aggression, if I have combat training and Hall of Heroes and Spider-Girl or something like that, I probably wouldn't count those as permanents. So instead, I'm going to be looking for 7 to 8 cards that are events that are going to continuously go through your deck, and then maybe a couple extra cards that are non-permanents, right? So then at the beginning of the game, maybe you have 11 targets. Your odds are sitting at 17%, and then by the end of the game, you've thinned down to 30, but you've only removed 3 of those permanent targets, so you're still sitting at like a 23% odds towards the end of the game. So that's my recommendation for people. We'll go back to the PowerPoint and go through those recommendations in summary. So really, the difference between 5 to 6 targets, 7 to 8 targets, even 9 to 10 targets, it's pretty negligible, right? You're sitting in the 10 to 15% chance range before you thin your deck. And this is one of the reasons deck thinning is really, really important. And that's going to be a video I promise we get to next week. But deck thinning can increase your odds of this power of combo actually paying itself off. When you're deciding if you should include these cards, instead of thinking about how many targets you have, think about things like, what's the average cost of cards in my deck? If I have a ton of really expensive hero cards and a ton of really expensive aspect cards, well, first of all, that might be too expensive of a deck. But second of all, you might need to include those power-ups to make sure you can do multiple actions per round, or that you're not just stuck doing one thing. Because when you do one thing, usually you fall behind the villain. Think about how many of your targets for your power-up cards are permanents. If you're running 10 upgrades that are 2 cost and they stay on the board forever, they're not preparations or whatever, then it's probably not worth running the power-ups. But at the same time, maybe you want to use them to get those out. And think about whether or not you care, right? If you're thinking about deck thinning, but your plan is to burst and just rush the villain down, then it doesn't really matter whether your deck is thinned at the end and you have a 23% chance, a 14% chance at the beginning, because hopefully you've won before you get to that, oh, now I've thinned my deck and I'm down to 23%, up to 23% chance. So think about what style of game you're playing. Are you building a deck that's going to burst and rush? It might make more sense to include power-ups because those enable more burst turns. But if you're thinking about a game where you're going to ramp and already have resources available to you on the board, that extra power-up might not really help you as much. I hope this gives you a little bit of guidance about what to do with power of cards. It's no concrete hard and fast rule. You're going to have to figure out what you're comfortable with. But I definitely recommend using this calculator to sort of figure out what are the odds, how thin should I try to make my deck, when does this combo really kick off and make me feel comfortable with what percent chance I have drawing a target and a power of in the same turn. Thanks for tuning in for this Mighty Marvel Minutes.